Let's see. Yep, recording that now. Thanks for reminding me. So yeah, we add the components to the screen either by dragging them on like so, or by clicking on one of the components, clicking on the screen, and then pressing this arrow here to add it to the screen. If you then step to the nav panel here and start to actually look at the components that you've added, what you'll see is that the components get added basically in a kind of tree structure. So one component can contain multiple other components. For example, if you look at this list component that we've got selected here, you can see that list component contains these list items. And if you want to put a component inside another component, then again, you can either grab that component and kind of drag it inside the component like that, or sometimes it's easier is just to click on the component that you want to put the thing into, and then select the one that you want. So let's say you want like a form or something like that, and then press this arrow again and it will insert that into the component that you've got selected. This way of kind of breaking down your screen into kind of components which have components inside of them is typically how you design like web applications. And in terms of kind of laying your screen out, what you'll notice is every time you add any of the components to the screen, by default, these components are going to naturally fall kind of underneath each other. So you can see as I add like this button, it drops underneath there, for example. And if I add another one of these div block components, it drops underneath there down the screen. And then, as I said, if you want to kind of put stuff inside these things, then you would pull it inside that thing. But when you pull it inside, if you were to add another component inside that, then that one will appear kind of underneath the previous one. So you can see by default, everything's just kind of sitting on top of each other and dropping down the screen. This way of working is one of a concept that's basically called the box model. That's a web concept. And with the box model, I've made a few notes on this here. The boxes themselves, as I've written here, basically always sit on top of each other, just dropping down the screen. When I say boxes, you can basically think of every single component that you add to the screen as a box. So in these cases, we've got these obvious like big blocks that we've added. But even like the button, you can kind of think of that as a box. If I was to add like a map to the screen, like down here, you can think of that as a box as well. And as you can see, that box naturally falls underneath the one that's above it. So just to kind of recap that point, every single component that you're adding to the screen, you can basically think of as like a little box, and each one of those boxes is just going to sit on top of each other going down the screen. So the question then is, how do you actually build your screen up and position stuff correctly on the screen if everything by default is just going to be sitting on top of each other, dropping down the screen? So to do that, you basically need to scroll down to this layout section here. And under the layout section, you have components which basically allow you to achieve kind of more advanced layouts other than stuff just dropping down the screen on top of each other. So if I just delete some of this stuff here by clicking on it and just pressing the delete key on my keyboard, what I can do is I can come here and grab one of these layout components. So I'm going to grab this columns component here and add it to the screen. And as you'll see, when I add the columns component to the screen, this comes by default looking like this. So you have a columns component here, and then that contains two kind of child components, which are these individual columns. Like I said, components can contain other components. So in this case, this columns component is containing these two child components. Now the column component is a kind of special one when it comes to laying out your screen, because this component allows you to overcome what I was just discussing at the start. It allows you to get past that point where everything is just sitting on top of each other. As you can see in this example, when we add these two columns, it basically puts the two columns next to each other rather than on top of each other. If I was to add another columns component just onto the screen, you'll see this columns component again will sit underneath the previous one, but the columns inside it will sit next to each other again, like so. So the columns component allows you basically to start to build out a screen where stuff is sitting next to each other on the screen, as opposed to just automatically going down the screen. When you click on any of the components then, if you come across to this right hand side of the screen here and click on this little cog icon at the top, what you'll see is you get a kind of properties panel here. And this properties panel tells you what the properties are for the component that you have selected. Each component that you add is going to have a different set of properties associated with it. So for example, when I add a heading component here, you'll see that the properties that I have are things like text, for example. Whereas when I click on this columns component, you'll see I have a different set of properties. For the columns component, the property that you've got is this layout, selected layout property. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to change the number of columns that you're including within your columns component. So by default, as we saw, every columns component comes with 2 columns inside it. But if I was to switch this to a different layout, you can see now that this has 3 columns inside it. If I were to grab like this one here, you can see we suddenly have 6 columns inside there as well. So using this kind of layout property here, you can start to break your screen up into columns of different sizes as well. So now we have kind of 2 columns components, one with 2 columns in and one down here with 6 different columns in. What we could do now is, as I said before, you could start to put other stuff kind of inside these columns. So like if you wanted to have, like a heading or something on the left-hand side, you could like drag this in and drop a heading in there. If you wanted to put something underneath this heading, then you could select this column again, either just by clicking on it here or clicking it on the left. And then you could add another component inside there as well. So for example, we could grab like a, let's say like another, a calendar or something like that, or a map again, and just put that inside the same column as well. So now you can see we have like a column here, and inside that, that's got a heading and a map underneath it, like so.
Question, Samuel, when is it better to use the arrows and when is it better to use the drag and drop to be effective?
Yeah, good point. So these arrows here that we looked at the start, as I explained, you can kind of click on one of your components, like your column component here, and then you can use this arrow to insert something into that specific component. So these arrows are really useful when you know kind of that I've got a component, I want to put something directly inside it. So in this case here, where we've broken the screen up into like 6 different columns, probably what you want to do is you want to grab another component and say, put it inside this column here. So at that point, I'd say the easiest thing to do would be just to like click on this column here and then click on your component and drop it in. That way you kind of, like exactly where you're going to be placing that component on the screen. With the dragging, I would normally just use that when I want to quickly add something like that to the bottom of the screen. But with the dragging, it can be a bit harder to kind of see which specific component you're dropping something into, so it's a bit less granular, I guess.
Hey Samuel, from my experience, the more complex it became, your screen, the more I would use the arrows, because if you really have very complex structures on your screen, then the drag and drop is not really feasible anymore. So then it's much better to use the arrows.
Yeah, stuff gets kind of, it's hard to see where you're going to put it and that kind of thing. That's a good point. And then just a couple more points on these arrows here. So I said kind of if you want to add something in, you can click on the component and then click this forward facing arrow here. And what this does, if we go into a bit more detail, is this arrow basically inserts the component as the kind of first component, the first child component of this column. If I was to click the map again and then click this backward facing arrow instead, what this would do is it would insert that as the kind of last component as opposed to the first. So if we look here, you can now see we have a column and then a button, and then the map is placed after it. Like I said as well, by default, the components, when they're not columns, are going to sit on top of each other. So the ordering that you've got here is important. If the map was to come first, then that would be at the top and the button would be underneath. But if the map comes second, then the map's going to be underneath. So when you're kind of designing your page, the first thing I guess you want to do is basically in your head kind of break it out into these different columns that you're going to have. So if you've got a page layout where you want to have kind of like a couple of blocks on top of each other, maybe one block you want to take up kind of, like half, break it up into like two sections like we saw here. Maybe in the second block you want to break it up into like 3 separate sections or something like that. Then I would kind of add these different columns to the screen to start off with, and then use this layout option here to basically break the thing up in the way that you want. And then once you've kind of broken up the layout, then come and kind of start inserting your components into the different sections that you need. So like, I don't know, grabbing like your table or something and putting it in here like so, and then grabbing like another component and putting it in like this one like so, for example. So this way you can start to kind of break the layout of the screen out, and then you can start to actually put the kind of visual stuff onto the screen that you want to display. Is there any questions on this first kind of column concept, or does that all make sense for now?
What if you want to use a watermark, like an image back of all those things?
Yeah.
So how can we do that?
So yeah, you can add a image component into one of these blocks here. So either I can kind of scroll down here and there's a media section with an image, or you can also just search in this box here for like an image. And the way the image works is you can, same as the other components, you can either drag that on or you can click on it and just insert it onto the screen. Then again, on the right hand side of the screen, under this little cog icon here, this shows you again like the properties for that specific component. So we saw for the columns component that we had this layout property that we could change. For the image component, we have this source property here, and the source property allows you to pick an image basically to display in here. So when you click this, you get this pop-out box here, and under this first tab, you can kind of click on this Add New button to upload an image from here. Or if you know kind of, if your image is on like the internet somewhere, like on Google Images, then you could enter in an image from here as well. If there's like an example one I could grab, something like this. And you can just grab that instead and kind of put it in here. So either take a URL or just, okay, that one's not allowed. Let me find one that actually works. Open image. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you can either kind of paste a URL in like that, or you could come to this first public files section here and like upload one here if you've got one that you want to use already. So that's kind of, like dealing with images. So now you kind of understand a bit about how you would start to like lay the screen out, break it up into different columns and add the different components onto the screen. Once you've added the components onto the screen, you'll also see that on the right hand side under this little paintbrush icon here, this is where the kind of individual styling lives for your different components. So if I kind of scroll down through this list here, you'll see you have options to do things like pick like fonts if you want to like change a font of something, options to do things like align text, italicize text and so on, and set like colors and that kind of thing. So any styling that you're going to do is basically controlled from this panel here. So for example, if I was to come in here and grab like one of my typography components here, the typography components are things to do with text essentially. So stuff like a heading or paragraphs and so on. So once you grab a paragraph as well, I could kind of click on this column that I've added, and then I could use this backward arrow to insert this paragraph in there as well. Then I could come to like this typography section here, and I could use this to basically, change the fonts, change font sizes and so on. The styling's going to basically affect all the components that are inside the component that you've selected. So here we've got the column selected. So if I change like the font size to 14, it will change the font size for kind of everything inside here. But if I was just to grab this heading, I could set this size like so to kind of change that as well. So you can like manage different bits kind of differently depending on what you've got selected essentially. I could also set like a background on just this paragraph here and then have a different background on the heading, or I could select kind of like the the whole containing box and give that a background if I wanted the whole box to have the same background, for example. This is something you kind of like play around with a bit as well, but there are lots of different options of things like you'll see here, like adding borders and that kind of thing, and changing the color of text and so on. Was that a question here, or maybe it's Discord?
Yes,
Yep.
I have a question. What if like you have lots of boxes and then like there are some particular boxes that you want to give the same styles,
Yeah.
the same properties, and then like you don't want to be doing it for every single box, and you want to do it like for a way like you can pick those certain boxes you want, and then like you give them the style at the same time.
Yeah, good point. So what you can do on that front is, again, you've kind of added these different boxes and you started applying styles to them. So if I add a heading in here and start to apply some like styling to that, I'll just give this a background, make it obvious. What you can do kind of once you're happy with the styling that you've got is you can come to the top of this styling panel here and you can enter in like a class name. So I could call this like orange header or something like that. And once I've done that, this class is now kind of saved. So you'll see if I select one of the other components and then look in this class box, then that class will be available there. And when I pick it, it will kind of like take all the stylings And then if I were to update the stylings on one of these, then that would update the styling for all of them. So yeah, once you've kind of broken the screen out the way you want it, you would then start applying the styling. And as was pointed out, you'd probably want to save like some of the styling as you went along as like these classes here. And then you could reuse that throughout your entire app to make sure that you have kind of like consistent styling throughout it, as opposed to having to go through and update every single individual one. Did that kind of answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So let's say now, if we wanted to start off by creating maybe like some example pages to show you some real examples of how you would actually use these different concepts then. So if you wanted to create like a maybe like a sign up screen to start off with for your application, what you could do is you could start off by adding something like these columns to the screen, like I said before, to start to break the screen up. When I add this to the screen, it has 2 by default, but what I could do is I could just delete one of these like so. When I delete that, you can now see I've got 1 column on the left, and then there's kind of nothing on the right anymore. If I want to come and like centrally align this column to the center of the screen, one of the options you'll see I've got on the right hand side over here is this layout option. So by default, when you add the components to the screen, this first layout option is going to be checked, and this is the kind of default option that you normally want to have. And this option will have the screen lay out the way that I've explained it so far. So it will lay stuff out so that it all kind of just sits on top of each other down the screen. And if you're not using the columns component, it will lay it out so everything just takes up like the full width of whatever the available space is. So you can see the tabs take up the full width here, this box takes up the full width, and so on. If, however, I switch to this second layout option here, this changes things slightly in that you'll see it gives you a whole bunch of options underneath to do things like justify and align. So on the justify option, if I kind of click this one here, you can see that centrally aligns the central column. If I pick this one, that aligns it to the right, and so on like that. So using this kind of second layout option here, you suddenly get the option to use these like justify and align options to start to centrally align stuff on the screen. So a quick way to kind of create like a centrally aligned box is to add kind of one of these columns and then use this centrally align option to centrally align that. If you wanted then, to carry on building out a kind of like sign up screen for your app, the next thing you could do is you could scroll down and you have like this forms section here. And in the form section, you'll notice we have like this form block component here. So I could grab that and kind of put it inside this column component here. And that would have the effects like we can see in the nav bar of kind of like nesting that form inside that centrally aligned column. If I then wanted to kind of change the text and the styling a bit on this form, what I could do is I can double click on like this label here, and that allows me to actually edit the text. So I could have like username, for example, and then I could maybe double click on this one and switch that to like password if I wanted to have like a username and password sign up form. Similarly with the button, I could kind of double click on that and edit the text here. So wherever there's any text, you can just always double click on it and edit it like that. If I click on these text input boxes and then look under this cog again here, you'll see the properties for the text input box include this placeholder property here. And this placeholder property basically defines whatever the placeholder text is in here. So I could switch this to like enter your username, for example. And then we can have enter your username and switch this one to like enter your password. If I wanted to maybe like style this form a bit differently, I could come over again into my styles panel, and I could come to this like spacing option here. And this spacing option allows me to kind of put bits of spacing around my box, my form block box that I've got selected. So I could add like spacing like so by kind of clicking on these different sections here in order to like space that out. I could then like scroll down, and like I said before, you've got like a border section here. So I could come in here and click this little line here to like add a border. I could change the border width like so, 42, and I could change like the border color by clicking on this thing here maybe and just putting in some like either entering in a color or like clicking on, you know, the color picker option here to like change the color of the box. So now you've kind of got like a box in the center of the screen with like a little border around it. You could then maybe come up here and again, under like this spacing section, we could add like some spacing on top of the box, like so, to basically kind of like space that out down your screen. If I wanted to change like the whole background of the entire page, then again, I could click on like this big kind of containing box here, and I could give that a background color by coming over here and like selecting a background color like that. And if I wanted to change like the font colors, then I could come here and like under the typography section, I could pick like the color option here to change like the color of the font. Maybe change like the font itself just by picking something like that. If I click on this box again here as well, under like the border section, I could add like you've got like a radius section here, which allows you to kind of control the corners of the box itself. So I could do something like that to kind of give it rounded corners, for example. And doing something like that, you can build out kind of a simple like login screen for your application. Once you've kind of built out your first screen, you probably want to go in and then put a second one in. And that's where you come to this like second pages tab here. So under the pages tab, you can basically come and add kind of new pages to your application. So I could have a new page here, which I could call like, I don't know, home, for example. And when you add the page, you have an option to basically add a path here. And this will be the path that the page is kind of going to live under when you view it in the browser. So the kind of URL that you'd come to. Actually I might rename that to something different. Let's call this application or something, so we can differentiate it from the first one. So we can call that like application. So now we have like a second page now, you'll see. And when I click on that, it kind of loads up that separate blank page to start kind of building something out of here. We could also kind of go to this first page that we've created, this home one, and if you click on the cog here, and it will expand out the kind of options for that pages. And here you could add like a different path as well for this page, if you wanted it to kind of live under a different place. If you've got no path added to it, then it will just be like the default page that loads when you first come to your app. So using this kind of mechanism, now you can start to break your application up into its different screens. So now we have two screens. We've got the home one, which we made this like simple login on, and then we have this second application screen here, which is like our main app that we want to start putting stuff into. Is there any other kind of questions on this section now before we carry on? Well, that's all good then. So we've now kind of, we've broken an app up into like our application screen and a home screen like so. Once you've kind of built this thing out here, if you want to kind of test what your app looks like when it's running live, you can come to like this drop down button here, and you can use this generate code option here to basically actually generate the real, computer source code which builds this app up in real life. When that happens, you'll see like the app build taking place. And when that's complete, you can basically come through to the preview button here and then view a kind of preview mode of your app in the browser as well. So if I come over here and kind of load this up here, you can see we have our home screen that we created here. And then if I want to come through to that second application one, which is just a blank screen at the moment, then that lives under this kind of, second application path that we created. If you want to navigate kind of between these pages without having to come and actually, type in the thing up here, to do that, what you would do is basically use these navigation components that you see. In fact, you'd use the component, this text link component that you see down here. So this text link component, if I add this to the screen, maybe at the bottom of my form block, this allows you to kind of enter in a link to navigate to a different page. So if I was to add that here, again, I can just double click on this and maybe change it to like application, for example, like so. And then if I come to the properties panel again over here, you'll see that the properties I have associated with the text link are things like the URL that I want to navigate to and so on. If I put a URL in here like google.com or something like that, then clicking on this would bring me to like the Google page. If I want to navigate though to one of these other pages that I've created here, what I can do is I can switch from this type that I've got selected here, which says like external web page, to this second type here, which is the internal pages. So these are the pages of your own application that you're creating. So in other words, the pages that you've added here. So what I could do now is I could put in like /application, for example. And now clicking on this button here will navigate me to this like second application page. So just to recap, you would essentially, create your separate pages on this screen here. And then you can, click between them here in order to actually start building out the different screens on the page builder. And then if you want to navigate between them when you're running your app live, then you can add like these different links to the screen and put in the pick this second kind of internal navigation thing here, and then enter in like the page that you want to navigate to when a user kind of clicks on that link when you're running your thing live. So to give another example, if I actually change this to something like, let's say like sign up screen, for example, what I could do is if I go back to this first home screen is I could kind of change this to say something like sign up, or, don't have an account, sign up, something like that. So now when the user clicks on this, I can like navigate them to this separate sign up screen, give them like a different form, for example, to sign up to the app rather than log in. If you want to kind of reuse components across different screens as well, quite a useful thing you can do is if I come to like this little edit button up here, is I can do edit and then selected component and click this save button here. And this allows me to basically save the full configuration that I've added to the screen here. So I could save this as like login form, for example. And that then adds a login form component under this snippet section here. So if I was to now go to my kind of sign up screen, I could basically grab this login form and kind of insert that directly onto the screen like so. So that allows me to kind of reuse components that I might want to reuse but kind of change certain things about. So on this sign up screen, I'd probably want to kind of rename this here to like sign up, for example. And then I could change this text link component here to say something like already have an account, something like that. And then log in like so. And I could change again the URL that I've added here to basically navigate me back to this first home screen, which has my kind of login thing on like so. And then, yeah, something like that. So now we have kind of like two separate screens set up, which allow us to kind of click between the login and sign up separately. And then I could create maybe like a third screen here actually, which could be like my main application that I've actually, when I've actually logged into that, like so. Add that one back like that. So we have kind of like three separate screens now, one to kind of sign up. This one we could change maybe to be like login, for example. And then one for the application itself. I need to grab my charger as well. Are there any other questions at this point at all? Just have to quickly grab my laptop charger because I've got to run out of battery. Sorry about that. Yeah, so does anyone have any questions at all, or can move on to like the last section?
I'm kind of interested to see as well, Samuel, maybe like you can give some ideas on how to kind of structure your page for a proper application. Like where do you kind of start with the design process and all those kind of things?
Yep. So we could take a look at, I guess, yeah, if we were looking at maybe our kind of main application screen here, and having built like kind of sign up and login screen, how you might go about starting to think about breaking something up to build something for your main page as well. So the way I would normally do that is, as I kind of said at the start, when you're kind of looking at your screen, you can basically visualize that screen as being broken up into these different boxes that I was talking about. So if I was looking at like this, screen that we're looking at the moment, for example, I can see on like the right hand side here, I have like a big long bar, have like a bar here kind of next to it, and then I have this central section here and a section on the right hand side of the screen here, for example. So these are all like in my head kind of like different boxes that I've got laid out on my screen. So my thought process would basically be to kind of break the screen up into these kind of different boxes that we've got here, and then start off by looking at how I can kind of add the general kind of box structure to the screen. So yeah, like example like this, we take a look at the central section here. I'd say like at the top here, I've got this one box that I've got added here. And then underneath that, I've got like a kind of second big box here. And then that box itself is broken up into like 3 separate sections. So I would kind of, again, come into this component section here, and then start to add components to break up into those different boxes. So I've got this top one here, and then I want to add a second box underneath, which in this case, if I use this div block component here, that div block represents basically an empty box that you're adding to your screen. So one that's kind of not broken up into columns or anything like that. I can then use, again, like this layout component here if I wanted to like centrally align or kind of space the stuff out a bit differently here. So I could do something like that to kind of break the thing up into, kind of top and bottom bit. And then in this bottom section here, I could see that I have like, 3, again, I've got like one big box here and then a kind of central box here and then another kind of box on the right. So that's like 3 separate boxes again. So maybe I'd add like this columns component like this, for example, and break that up like, break that up by going to this cog section here and something like that to break it up into like the, separate sections that I've got here. If I wanted to have this like take up the remainder of the screen, then I should be able to come over to the size section and basically give this like, 100% height in order to kind of make this like the central part of my screen, and then do the same for each of these individual columns like so, for example. So now we've kind of got this initial kind of layout you can see. So it's always a case basically of starting off and kind of breaking the thing up into its different kind of boxes that you can see represented on the screen like that. If you then want to like drill deeper, when you start looking in kind of more detail, if we're looking at this kind of screen here, just like this right hand side box here, you can see again is broken up into a whole bunch of different like sub boxes. So you've got like a box at the top here which has stuff in, another one underneath there, and then maybe this like bottom box here. So again, if you want to add those in such a way that they're kind of just going down the screen like that, then you can just use this empty like div block option here to like add those going down the screen like so. So now we're kind of like breaking that thing up into its different constituent boxes again. If I was to click on this column component again and add like this different layout option, then I could add like another box at the bottom, and I could again use that same option we did before to basically get that one to take up the remainder of the space like so. And then I could do something similar for like the right hand side bar as well. One useful thing there that we didn't mention already is that if I click on one of these components, I can come over here and do like edit copy to like copy that, and then I could maybe replace that thing on the right. So you can see kind of logically now that we've started to break this screen out into like its different sections. And then starting to break it down, I could then start to kind of like add the individual like child components to that as well. So for example, I could add like another like box in here, and then I could start to put like, if I wanted like a string of images in there, start to like add the images within the box as well, like so. So we've got like something like that, and kind of copy that along the screen. If I pick these, actually I can make these, just give these a smaller size. So I could come to this like size section over here, and give these like a fixed size, maybe like 30, 30, for example, to make like a smaller one like that. And then go across the screen like so. And then if you were to come down to have like this, just doing this quickly, like next section, we could come and add like a, text input or something into there like so. So the point basically is that your first step would be to like start to break the screen up using these columns and div block boxes into the different sections. And then once you've done that, start to actually kind of add the individual components within there. Does that kind of answer what you were asking, James?
Yeah, I think so. I just wanted to kind of like understand the process of it. So those images could potentially be icons or something like that. It can be kind of whatever you want in the application. And then if you wanted to like add tabs or something like that.
And then if you want to have like the tab section like we've got in here, for example, then under this component section here, you have like a tabs option, which you can add like so. And that's going to come by default with just 2 tabs attached to it and some kind of default styling. If you want to add a new tab, then again, if you select like this tabs component and look under the cog here, you've got an option to like add a new tab by clicking the plus button here. So like all the other components, the tabs component is going to have a certain set of like properties associated with it. And in this case, it's to do with kind of managing how many tabs you have here. And then I could like, double click again on the text to like relabel this to something else and so on. And if I just have a quick look actually at the tabs in here, again, you can see now the way we've kind of broken this down is we can see the different boxes that we've added to our screen. And then inside these boxes, we can now see we've got this tabs component added, which itself contains a whole bunch of different tabs that we've got here. So if I now come and kind of click between these different tabs, I can then go and add different stuff inside each one of these as well. So I could have like a button in this tab and then, a list or something inside this one here, which I could click between like so now. So the tabs component, way to kind of break the screen up into different tabs as opposed to breaking the whole thing up into different pages as well. For the last like 5 minutes, do we have any kind of specific points anyone wants to discuss or points they've kind of got stuck on so far? Or
I don't know if Lawrence, if you want to go start asking your questions, if your list. If you're still there, Lawrence.
We lost him.
Okay, well, I guess then if people want to kind of try out the platform, building, little applications, you can always grab Samuel or I in Discord and ask us any questions directly in there. Got our handles. And yeah, Samuel, can you post up the video into Discord as well at the end of this? Because I know like Cedric, for example, mentioned that he wasn't able to make it today because of a power outage.
Yeah.
Make sure we get that up ASAP. And then, there's nothing else for now. Then I guess that's it.
Yeah, and if people just reach out to me, I'm happy to help kind of get started and that kind of thing.
Awesome. Cool. Cheers. Thank you very much, Janine. All right. Speak to everyone later. Oh, sorry. We have another question. So we're finished. Where about you can show? Can you show that quickly, Samuel, now?
I've got some, example apps in here. Let's see.
Maybe show the Shopify examples interesting. I don't know.
Let's see. Yeah, this is like an example Spotify style application that we were prototyping. So similar to kind of what I was showing you on the other one here, you can basically see that we've added like these different components to the screen, these different boxes basically, and put like different text and stuff inside them here. And then if I go into the preview bit here, I can kind of like open this up in the real live mode and click between the different screens on here, which basically correspond to like the different pages that I've created on this pages section here. So as I was kind of pointing out, start off by kind of breaking the stuff up into its different pages, and then looking at this screen and kind of thinking how you can break it up into its like different sub box sections, and then start putting like the text and stuff inside of those. So this one's got like playlist page, library, search, and home pages, like so.
And Samuel, what can you go through a few more of the components that you used in order to build up that page?
Yeah, so like 90% of the page you can see is basically these different div block boxes that I've added. So like every single kind of section here is just like a separate box basically that's been added. You can see that on the left here. So that is always kind of step one, is like adding these things in. And then having added those, essentially all I had to do after that is basically come in and add like the text and icons basically. So here I've got like a text icon, which is under the typography section here, this span icon here, in order just to put some like placeholder text onto the screen. And then over here you can see you've got like a image one, which is just under this media section here to like add the logos. And then the same just on this right hand section here, if I kind of click anywhere, you'll see basically there's like a box which this thing has been put inside, one of these div block boxes. And then inside that we've added some more typography components. So here we've got like a heading, which is this heading component here, which just allows me to place like some heading text onto the screen. And then again we'll have this like span one from here to add like this like songs text here. And then I think even this like button here, if I click on this again is just like another one of these empty boxes again. And inside it I've put like a image icon, which is the play button. And then basically just given this div block like a green background color from here, and also given it like a radius in order to make it kind of round. And similarly, if I look at like the other screens as well, it's all basically like the same kind of thing. So like on this search screen here, if I click on like this section here, you can see again there's like a whole bunch of these empty boxes that have basically been added down the screen. And then inside each of those boxes I've added like bits of text. So we've got like where it says browse all, we've added the heading component again, which is this under this typography section here. And then similarly another kind of box here, and inside that added another heading component for like the podcast, for example, and then like a image component over here from the image section to actually get the pictures on the screen as well. And then if I click on these again, these main boxes have got the kind of background colors placed on them in order to give the green kind of styling there as well. And then if I take a quick look as well, just lastly, maybe like the home screen, you'll see kind of like the same structure basically. So kind of going down the screen, you'll see again we have like, if I come to the navigation section again, you'll see again we have like a whole bunch of these boxes again that are getting added kind of down the screen inside of each other. And then inside those individual boxes we've added like a heading, for example, and then inside this one we've added things like an image, and again like another, in this case a text link, this was the component to kind of, navigate to a separate screen. And then, same in this section here. Again, we've got like a big kind of box here, and then inside there a whole bunch of sub boxes again, and inside those boxes things like, again, headings, images, and so on. So it's really a case, as I was kind of trying to highlight, of basically breaking the screen up into like these different sections, these different like div block sections, different boxes. And having done that, then to start to put the kind of content inside of those. And then once the content's kind of inside in the right places, you can think a bit more about like the styling, which is just the case of kind of adding like the background colors and so on from this styles panel over here. Maybe doing things like, if I click on this text link or on this span here, things like kind of, spacing the stuff out a bit so it's not touching each other by using like this spacing section. But in reality, like very few kind of different components actually required in order to build up a screen like that.
That's good. Does that help? Possibly. Okay, well, I think you're out of time now. I don't know if Lawrence is back and wants to ask questions as well. But if not, then we're available on the Discord channel. So just let us know if you have problems or if you get stuck.
Hi, Samuel. How are you doing?
Good.
Okay, cool, man. Nice presentation on the front end. But my biggest questions maybe are more back end related.
Yep.
I don't know if this is the platform to ask about them, or I can do that on the Discord.
I'm happy to stay on now and discuss that as well. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess if anyone has to go or drop off or anything like that, it's good to go now. If not, you can stay and I guess listen to Lawrence's questions and then can learn from that. I need to drop off. But you guys are welcome to stay on and continue.
Oh, cool, man. So Samuel, the first question that I do have has to do with the database.
Yep.
What kind of databases are we looking to be able to use with this platform?
So the main one that you add on this screen here is a SQL database behind it. So you might have seen like when you start adding different tables on this page, you can also click on like this relations section here in order to kind of visualize these as like table relations. And from here you can do things like, put like primary and foreign keys and stuff between the different tables. So this is like a kind of, under the hood, it's like a relational database setup, basically.
Okay. So it's based on MySQL?
Postgres.
Oh, okay. Cool, man. The next one had something to do with user registration.
Yep.
I did notice that one of the examples that you gave us was the login page, which had the user registration. So how easy is it for us to actually create a complete user registration system? This one would now encompass the user registration part, the verification email, and the login. How easy is it for someone to do something like that? Is it automated, or do I actually need to pipe in all of that by myself?
Yeah, so you would basically start off by creating like a user table or something like this to like store your user information in.
Okay.
And then I think, did you go through the example that James sent round with like the to-do application already, or you didn't see that yet?
No, I to be honest, I haven't seen
that yet. Okay.
But it's fine if there's an example to
it. So what that basically shows is how you can kind of like set something up to write information into these tables from like the front end of your system, for example.
Okay.
Yep.
Hey Samuel, isn't there a template application that can be used for sign on that where you have that already worked out?
I do have like a kind of default one that you can install, which will come with like a standard user table. Yeah.
Cool. Because that's the perfect question that I was actually asking. Is there something that we don't really need to sit down and try to figure out? If someone comes in, he types in registration, he puts in his email, it sends him a verification. Can I customize that verification email? And then after he clicks on the verification, does it send him back to the login page of my application? And when he logs in, does it go? So if you have a already made custom template, then it's fine. I just need to take time to look at it.
Okay, yeah, I can share that with you then. You can take a look.
Thank you so much. I would very much appreciate that. The next question that I have is in regards to hosting. After I'm done creating my application, whether it be PWA, Android, iOS. What's the hosting like? How do I get from this platform to putting it on other platforms that like my general users can actually view? How do I host it away? Like, do I do in separate hosting, or you guys are now providing internal hosting to this?
You have both options basically. So what I was kind of showing through this preview button here, this is basically running like a instance of the application on our server under like this address here. But you can provide like your own URL to us to kind of host it on that instead, and then it would be running kind of on our servers but directed to from whatever your URL is. If you're like quite technical and for whatever reason you wanted to take it and host it somewhere else, then you can kind of export the entire application and then set it up on like a different server or something. But that would only be, yeah, if you're kind of, if you've got specific requirements that you need to do that for and you're kind of technical enough to set that up. Otherwise you can like just, yeah, like we're doing here, kind of host it directly on our servers. So that ours are on like Amazon Web Services.
Oh, okay. Okay. No, cool. That's fantastic. And this would also include with database schema as well.
Yeah, this has like the everything that you kind of build on here gets put into that like container instance of your application, and it's all running in there. Yeah.
Hey Samuel, every time that you click generate code, basically you're creating a new container and you deploy everything again in the hosting environment, correct?
Well, it's the same container, but it gets pushed.
Yeah, the same
the
container,
updates.
but you upgrade the container. The new code will always, and it's always running. It's always up there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and just so that I understand, sorry about that. I'm just gonna take you back a bit from exactly what you just said. If I hit preview or generate, I'm able to get something that I can throw onto a cPanel. Like I have my code, I have my separate SQL file, all in like a folder or a zip file or something like that, and then I can extract it and put it onto a separate domain that's separate from you guys.
You can do that as well, yeah. So under like this section, if you go to any of like the applications and look under here, you've basically got an option just to get the application code as well. So using that, you can take that and kind of deploy that on a separate server entirely if you wanted to. Or like I said, you can have it, just leave it running on our servers and kind of host it there. So
is there any extra charges you guys are doing for hosting? Is there something that we need to know? I'm guessing. Is it free? Is it going to be paid? Is it going to be something that's Very important question.
You have to discuss that with James, I think. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly.
For the purpose of the hackathon, it's free.
Yeah, it's free for the hackathon.
But if you want to commercialize it, there is a pricing for hosting. So we have a daily price for hosting. And for the extraction of code, I think till August, it's part of the fee of the front end. But then, there is a fee that you pay depending on what type of license you take.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks so much, Kurt, for that. I think I only have one more back-end question. Customer. Oh, yeah. In fact, it seems like it's one question. Sorry, I'd written it down. Customization and also debugging. Let's say, for instance, I've done everything on the platform, and I get my code, and for some reason, I discovered that there's like just one simple bug that doesn't require me coming back to the platform for me to be able to actually debug it, or I can actually just debug it myself. Is there sort of like a repo process that is involved? Can the two now be connected, or once I get my code, I fix it somewhere else, I can't bring it back into the system to adapt? Can I debug somewhere else and bring the code back into the system?
So yeah, you kind of have like when the code generates, you basically have an option from the front end to add like your own kind of custom stuff into that within our framework, basically.
Okay.
So like, yeah, under this like template section, basically you can come and like write your own kind of custom code in here and so on. And this kind of all fits within like our framework. So that you can take, edit, and do whatever you want with. But then you also have, when you start creating like stuff on these screens here, you basically get a set of kind of like auto-generated files. And those files you shouldn't edit, because if you do, they'll kind of get overwritten when you regenerate your code, basically. So yeah, if you want to add your own stuff, there's like an official way of doing it, basically, is the answer.
Oh, okay. So if I want to write my own stuff, okay, cool. I'm a little bit lost there. I'm gonna be honest. I'm a little bit lost.
In what
Right.
in what respect?
Let's say the screen that I'm looking at right now,
Yeah,
the screen that you have right now, I have auto-generated the page update users from the system
yeah,
itself. And then I'm hosting it on a separate domain, or I'm hosting it separately from you guys. Then I sort of think, okay, look, there's just like one little tweak that I want to do. Maybe I just want to change the name update users to updated users. Just in it, I'm just adding an extra D,
yeah,
right? But it's easier for me to just do it with the code that I generated, right? So I can just quickly get into the code I generated and then just find the extra D and then just put in the extra D where I need to put it. But then a couple of months go down the line and I discover, you know what, there's more I need to add, which is not just the extra D.
yeah.
So I want to take it back to the system or back to the platform to add the extra stuff. But I don't really want to come back and keep on adding the extra D. So what I'm asking is, if I edit it somewhere else and then bring it back to the platform, will it still compute or there will be errors?
That example, you'd get an error, basically. So like this is an example of like an export, basically, I've got here.
Yeah.
And in here you have some kind of just completely generated files, like this one here, for example. And if I was to come in and like change this from like sign out to like sign out or something,
Exactly.
then yeah, that would get overwritten basically if I was to like regenerate the code. So that would that wouldn't really work like that.
Okay.
But if you wanted to kind of like integrate your own code on top of this, then there are certain places where you can do that basically. So I don't know if I've got, yeah, and like in this example here, I've got like where it says like custom function here. This is like a custom function that I've added. And this I can add here because it's not one of the auto-generated files, so it wouldn't kind of get overwritten when you regenerate the code.
Oh, okay.
So it's a case of like you can add your own stuff kind of on top of things, but you can't edit the stuff that has been generated.
Auto-generated.
Yeah.
No, perfect.
Makes sense?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Let me just see if I still have. But basically, I think these were the biggest questions that I had. Oh yeah, the deployment for Android and iOS. Considering, let's say I make an app, am I able to make a mobile application using the platform? That's the first question. The second one, is it hybrid, or do I actually have to do something else, or are we just talking about web applications?
Yeah, so this generates just like React code for the web. We have had some users who've taken this React code and done something to it to basically generate mobile code from it. But that's not something that we as a company like directly support at the moment. So yeah, I think there are tools out there you can use basically to take like this, whatever it is, like this React code and basically make it like mobile friendly. But that's not something we would give you by default.
Hey, Sam, but we have also other companies that have used our endpoints, correct? So you can use the endpoints that you create for the backend and use those.
Sorry, God, I can't quite hear you.
Sorry, what I was saying was that if you build the endpoints, you can use the endpoints of your backend application and use those, then make calls on those if you create a mobile app.
Yeah, so the apps kind of like, we've got this like front end section, which is generating just by default like React web code. And then you have like the back end sections, which are generating like Google Go code. And if you were to, what Kurt's saying, if you were to like write your own mobile app, for example, you can take that and kind of plug it into the back end code that's been generated as well. So this front end and back end can run like totally separately. So you can write like your own custom front end and connect it to this auto-generated back end, or you could write your own custom back end and connect it to like our front end, for example. They're like two completely separate components. Does that make sense?
I'm sure it's gonna make sense in a couple of minutes after we log out, and then I start playing around with your back end into front end. If I have any questions, I'll throw them onto the Discord item with your handle on it. All right, guys. I'm sure we're a little bit all tired. So yeah. So far, I think those were the major questions that I just had in regards to the back end and just seeing what the functionality is. So maybe Samuel, if you can, please send me a link to that user registration template.
Yep.
So I can have a look at it. And then, yeah, afterwards, I'm sure if I have other questions, we'll be just chatting on the Discord item.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for the time, eh?
Great. Cheers. Bye for now then.
Cheers, man.